Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cultivate E.D.H podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Cam, and today we've got our deck number 2 in our Commander 2020 review. We're just going to jump right in with Gavi Nestwarden. This is the Jeskai Cycling deck. Gavi Nestwarden reads, for those of you who haven't watched our first impressions video, which I highly recommend you go watch before this video, but Gavi Nestwarden reads 2 in a Jeskai, blue, red, white, a 2/5 human shaman. You may pay 0 rather than pay the cycling cost of the first card you cycle each turn. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 red and white dinosaur cat creature token. Aaron, tell me about Gavi.
Gavi is a really interesting cycling commander. I mean, we haven't seen anything like this before, to my knowledge. I mean, obviously, you know, the we have some commanders that say, when you draw your second card each turn, do a thing, but you don't have anything that puts that 0 on the cycling cost like this does. So this is going to be your prime cycling commander for those of you who are going to be wanting to do that. I think it's really cool. I think the cycling mechanic's pretty fun. Definitely really happy to see cycling get a little more spot in the limelight.
All right, let's go through all 3 of the commanders that are in this product, including Gavi, and we'll take a look and we'll determine which one fits right out of the box if you're going to play it, which one you should be playing. So the next ones up are Braylon, Skyshark Rider, and Shabraz, the Skyshark. So Braylon reads 3 in a red, 3/3 human shaman, partner with Shabraz, the Skyshark. Whenever you discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Bryland's Skyshark Rider, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. 1 red mana, activated cost. Target shark gains trample until the end of the turn. And Shabraz says 3 white blue, 3/3 Sharkbird, partner with Braylon, Skyshark Rider. Flying, whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Shabraz the Skyshark, and you gain 1 life. Azorius Hybrid, activated cost. Target human gains flying until the end of the turn. I really like this partner commander pair. I think it's kind of like taking what the Battlebond commander started and improving upon it. Now we're taking this partner mechanic, because we're never going to get the Commander 2016 partner again because it's just too powerful and it causes too many problems, as we've seen with the evolution of the Commander format ever since the Commander 2016 product came out. But we get this new partner mechanic, and honestly, I'm okay with it. But Braylon, Skyshark Rider, and Shabraz the Skyshark, I feel like work super synergistically together, and with the cycling mechanic, without specifically stating the word cycling.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I was going to point out about that is, it doesn't necessarily say it's a cycling commander, but it really kind of is. Uh, Obviously, cycling, you get to discard a card and draw a card. And so, for Braylon, he has that discard trigger, and Shabraz has that draw trigger that you're going to want to hit, and you'll be pinging people and gaining life. It's just a really nice synergy that they've got going between them. I think this is a really cool pair, especially out of the ones we've seen so far.
I just really think we should focus in on the fact that it says whenever you draw, whenever you discard, without specifically saying the cycling, because I feel like Gavi's super narrow in that respect. Where, yes, this deck is all about cycling, but I feel like the drawing and the discarding, in an overall sense, you might be able to build a better deck out of this precon, taking Braylon and Shabraz and making them the commanders instead of Gavi. Maybe Gavi's probably better in the 99 because it does synergize with the cycling, but maybe Braylon and Shabraz are the better choices straight out of the box. So, Aaron, tell us about the next commander that you can get out of the box.
So the next commander, we have Akim the Soaring Wind for 2 in a Jeskai, Flying Bird Dinosaur. Whenever you create 1 or more tokens for the first time each turn, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. And then for 3 in a Jeskai, creature tokens you control gain double strike until end of turn.
So,
I
this one's really supposed to synergize with Gavi, right?
Yeah, and that's sort of the idea of, you get to create those dinosaur cat tokens, and then Akim's going to take those and then make a white bird on top of that.
I think it's really clear which one is best out of the box, but I'm not sure what your opinion is. So, Aaron, give me your opinion first. Which one you think's better out of the box?
Oh, absolutely, Gavi. I mean, it's no contest. I do like the idea that Akim kind of synergizes with Gavi, but it doesn't really synergize with the rest of the deck. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with drawing cards or discarding cards or cycling in any way. There are a couple of cards in here that will let you create some tokens, but for the most part, it just wants to continue to cycle. So that being said, absolutely Gabby Nest Warden is the better out of these two.
See, I'm starting to. I think Braylon and Shabazz are probably the better ones out of the box. And I only say that because Gabby says you only get to pay 0 for the first one up front, and then when you draw your second card each turn, so that only happens once. You only get both of those once per turn. I think just maybe the whole pinging thing with Braylon and the whole gaining life thing with Shabazz, it's probably going to put you in a better position while also simultaneously knocking down your opponents.
Yeah, and I definitely think that Shabraz and Braylon will see their fair share of play out of the box, and Gabby will definitely switch in with them. But the other question is going to remain: you're going to have to put in another card in there. So what is that going to be looking like?
Hmm,
And that,
I'm not really sure. We'll get to that to the end of the episode when we determine what our top 3 edition cards are. But let's just jump right into the 99 with some of the new cards with Surly Badger Soar, which is very reminiscent of an enchantment that I personally love. Surly Badgersaur. Man, I cannot say that name. Is a 3 red 3/3. Whenever you discard a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on the Badgersaur. Whenever you discard a land card, create a treasure token. Whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land card, Surly Badgersaur fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. That is a mouthful.
yeah, it really is. One interesting thing to note with Akim, it's when you create one or more tokens, so that treasure token is going to trigger that because it's not just relying on creature tokens. So when if you create your treasure tokens with the Surly Badgesaur, you are going to be hitting Akim, which is kind of nice. But I think this is a cool card. I mean, definitely does a lot of different things, um, and it synergizes extremely well with the deck. No matter what you're discarding, you get to be doing things.
So this is very reminiscent of a black enchantment called Waste Not, which does this exact same thing except a little differently. It's black, so it has different. It has that same 3 rows of text though. Whenever you discard a creature, whenever you discard a land, whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land, you get an effect. I have a wheel deck and I play Waste Not, and its counterpart, the creature Bone Miser, I think it's called. I've been going back and forth on whether or not I want to put that put the Badgersaur in that deck because I feel like whenever you discard a land card, create a treasure token, that's so much better than adding the 2 black mana that Waste Not lets you do. But like in the context of this deck, I feel like it's probably a lot better than say if Gavi had black in her mana cost and she was able to play black cards, then this might synergize more with the whole cycling aspect.
Yeah, because a lot of times when you're cycling stuff, so you know what you're going to be discarding. If you're thinking, okay, I'm going to cycle my Valiant Rescuer, so I know that I'm going to be discarding a creature, or I'm going to use this land that has cycling, so I know that I'm going to be getting that treasure. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, you kind of know what's coming up. Where with Waste Not, I think it's also dependent on what your opponents are discarding, so that's a little more up in the air because you don't know what they have. So he definitely does synergize really well with this deck. It's a very cool card that I like seeing cards that do a lot of different things and not just like it gets to do this thing and that's absolutely it. When you got cards like this that have 3 different kind of lines of text that do different things, it's always nice to see Wizards giving us options on our cards.
And I think this card is really a nod towards where you might want to be going with this deck, where maybe you don't want to necessarily go from just make it a cycling deck. Maybe you want to turn it into a wheel deck, which might increase the power level a little bit, depending on where you are thinking you want to go with the deck. I think this card definitely lends itself more towards the wheel aspect than the cycling aspect.
Yeah, and I think if you were to swap over to wheel, that you would definitely switch over to Braylon and Shabraz, and they would be a lot better in that aspect. When if you're kind of going away from the cycling and more towards the wheel effects that would be going in here, and he would definitely the Surly Badgesaur would definitely is staying in this deck for sure.
Now, the next card on our list, it's one of those cards that the table gets to play with. We've seen some of these card designs before, and of course we're talking about Agitator Ant. 2 in a red, you get a 2/2 insect at the beginning of your end step. Each player may put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature they control. Goad each creature that had counters on them put on them this way.
Yeah, definitely an interesting kind of take on goad because generally when you goad someone, when you're goading someone's creatures, you're doing it yourself. You're saying, I don't want this particular creature to be able to attack me. But in this sense, with the Agitator Ant, they choose what creature isn't going to be able to attack you, and I think that there's definitely some politics in there for sure. You say like, okay, I'm gonna put these 1/1 counters on this creature in it, and I'm not gonna attack you with it, but in return, I want this such and such a thing from you. Whatever you need in that scenario.
Super political card. I love it. I really like the goad mechanic, as I've said before. The goad mechanic forces action, and I feel like this is one of those cards where it's a mate. They don't have to put the counters on there to go their and then have their creature goaded, but also you might play this down like, oh, well, I might have a way to help you get your creatures bigger and then hit the person to my right. All you have to do is just say yes, put the 2+1/+1 counters on it, and it's goaded. You just can't attack me with it, but you can hit him for more damage.
Yeah, definitely a really interesting political card that we're seeing. I love seeing Wizards kind of nodding to that political aspect of Commanders and printing cards like this. I think that it's not necessarily a really a cycling card. I don't know that it would stay in this deck for when all was said and done after you kind of edit it to your heart's desire. But it's one of those cards that is going to be added to the Commander format, and that we're going to get to play with as as time goes on, and we kind of find a home for this Agitator.
Speaking of interesting cards, Aaron, I'll let you read the next one because I know you've been ever since it was spoiled, you've been brewing around it.
Dude, okay, this card. So it's Cryptic Trilobite, XX. It's a Trilobite, and when it enters the battlefield with X counters on it, you can remove a 1/1 counter from Cryptic Trilobite to add a waste and a waste. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. And for one and tap, put a 1/1 counter on Cryptic Trilobite. As soon as I saw this card, I'm like, okay, I'm going to break this card. I wanted to find a way to break it. The first thing that came to my mind was using it with Mikaeus the Unhallowed and just getting infinite mana to do some kind of activated ability to help you win the game, whatever that may be. There, there's lots of options out there. I'm so excited to play with this card. It is a really interesting thing because it's not just infinite mana for the sake of doing anything you want. It's contingent on those activated abilities, and I think that is going to be really fun to see how people use those.
I mean, not that this card that I'm going to mention, Sponsor of Ulamog, which Aaron I know is a favorite card of yours, it does allow you to get the infinite mana to activate the Sponsor of Ulamog to play the Eldrazi cards from outside of the game, if that worked. But it's still kind of a fun, neat interaction.
Yeah, just a really cool interaction. Uh, I like Wizards not being afraid to print cards that will end up being powerful. I mean, they may have thought when they first created this card, like, oh, this isn't, this will be fine. But I guarantee people are going to break this card. It was the first thing I thought of as soon as I saw it. How can I break this? What can I do with it? And I love it. I'm really excited to be able to pick one up and put it. I'll probably put it into my artifact deck with Mikaeus the Unhallowed.
I'm really interested to see if this card gets broken, if there's a way to break it, other than like the classics where like Thrasios, which has a 4 mana activated ability, and you can basically draw your entire library using that, or some like we said, Spawn Sire of Ulamog, you can make infinite Eldrazi tokens instead of just like using the other activated ability to put them in from outside the game. You can just make a bunch of tokens in that way. It's a super interesting card because it reminds you a lot of like the Walking Ballista esque cards with the XX00, and then you can remove a counter to do something, except they put that handicap on it where it's like you can only spend this mana to activate abilities, which is a
And
really interesting restriction.
I'm glad that they put that on there. I think that that was, instead of just letting it create mana and just run rampant. Because I think if it didn't say spend this mana only to activate abilities, they probably wouldn't have put it in these decks. And if they had even printed it, it would have been banned pretty quickly, I think.
This card would be so busted if it said just add 2 colorless mana, and you can just spend that mana on whatever you want. It would be incredibly busted, more so than Walking Ballista is.
Yeah. So it's funny in the context of this deck. I don't have a lot to say about Cryptic Trilobite. I think it's a cool card. I think it is going to be fun to play in this deck and play around with, getting that mana and doing lots of different things with it, obviously. But
I definitely think that this is one of the cards that might not be the best in the deck, but it's definitely one of those cards that is like, I'm really excited to get my hands on this for other stuff. Within the context of the decks, it's just, yeah, it's pretty good. Because there's really no way to effectively abuse it to the level that you really want to be abusing this card.
yeah, I mean, running this card, you're gonna want to just abuse it for infinite mana. So in this deck, I don't see it really having that potential. Maybe it does. Maybe there's something I haven't thought of yet. But overall, still a good card. And I think we can move to our next card here. I'm really excited about this one as well. On one of our other free cards for Commander for 2 and a blue, Fierce Guardianship. It's an instant. If you control a commander, you may cast the spell without paying its mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell. So another free counter is going to be out there. Cameron, what do you think?
Within the context of this deck, it's basically just another counter spell. I think that maybe this lends itself to playing Browlin and Shabraz more because then you have 2 commanders. Because as of right now, they haven't changed the rule on partner commander tax, where if you have partners in the command zone, they share a commander tax. It's each one has its own tax applied. So I feel like maybe Fierce Guardianship lends itself more towards the partner commanders. You have a higher likelihood of being able to play either one of them and getting this spell for free. But kind of shifting focus from inside the deck, where it's just like, okay, it's a free counter spell, it's good. Obviously, it's very good. But outside of this deck, this card's gonna be so expensive. It's so good. It's the commander version of Force of Negation.
Yeah, and obviously all of the free counter spells that we've seen have gone to be a couple of bucks. So I think this will push its way up there pretty quickly. Maybe not as expensive as some of the other ones, obviously. It's not a force of will, but still a very good card. And again, I'm happy to see Wizards not afraid to print powerful stuff.
Now, on the flip side of this card probably lending itself to playing the partner commanders better, our next card probably lends itself better to playing Gavi as your commander. It's Dismantling Wave, a 3 mana sorcery, 2 and a white. For each opponent, destroy up to one target artifact or enchantment that player controls. But if you cycle it, you get to wipe everything. So maybe at the start of your turn, it's like the board's kind of out of control. I'm going to use my free cycle spell on Dismantling Wave to just wipe all their artifacts and enchantments.
Yeah, I think when I first saw this card, I figured it's the only time you're really going to want to be playing this is when you get to play it for free. I mean, 8 mana, is extremely expensive, and to just hit artifacts and enchantments, I think that there's better options out there. So
But it's also not bad as a single target removal when you think about it,
true.
because destroy up to one target artifact or enchantment that player controls. You get to do that 3 times for 3 mana. I mean, that's not bad.
Yeah, as a card on its own without the cycling, definitely a good card. And I think that we're gonna see it played mostly that way outside of this deck. I mean, I don't think people are really going to want to cycle this card unless they're going up maybe against someone who's playing extremely artifact heavy or extremely enchantment heavy, because again, 8 mana is a lot, and you will it cantrips obviously. It'll let you draw a card while you're destroying all the things, but for the most part, you're gonna want to be playing it for free. You're gonna want to be cycling it for free, unless you're doing it's just obviously just casting it for the 2 and the white to destroy this, or to do the single target removal. But overall, definitely a really interesting card, really fun kind of mechanic there of letting you cycle and then making it better.
I would agree with that sentiment that I think either way it could go it's one of those cards that could go either way. It's obviously good in this deck if you have Gavi at the helm where you get to cast it for free potentially, but then also it's not terrible as a single target removal because it kind of copies itself in a way, if you think about it in a weird kind of way where if it just said destroy target enchantment that target player controls, it kind of like copies itself 3 times because you get to do it for all 3 of your opponents. With that, I think we'll get on to our next card, which is our last 2 Impeti? I like the way Impeti sounds. I'm going to go with Impeti. First up, we have Psychic Impetus. It's a part of the Impetus cycle of Commander 2020, where it's an enchantment. Psychic Impetus reads 2 and a blue. Enchant creature. It gets +2/+2 and is goaded. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, you scry 2. I think this is one of the better Impetus I of the cycle.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that and the last one we'll talk about are probably my two favorites, because I think they give you the most value of, when this creature attacks, it does a thing. Scrying being a really good ability, especially in Commander when you're trying to dig for those cards that you need to sort of end the game.
And then
And
Shiny Impetus with 2 and a red, doing the exact same thing, exact same mana cost, +2/+2 and is goaded, except when it attacks, you get a treasure token.
yeah, this one I think is probably my favorite. Especially for it being in red, letting red kind of ramp a little bit and get those treasure tokens. I think that this is going to be a good include for some either mono red or Boros decks to, goad out some other people's creatures to take some of the aggro away from yourself, and to ramp a little bit with those treasure tokens, getting as many as you can before something happens to the creature it's attached to.
All in all, the Impetus cycle isn't bad. I definitely think that Psychic and the Shiny Impetus cards are probably the best two because you're obviously getting that card selection from Psychic, and then you're obviously getting that ramp from Shiny Impetus. All in all, these two are probably the best two because you're getting more out of them than just gaining life or giving the creature trample and making it bigger and making it harder for your opponents to block. Whatever.
Yeah, and I really like the impetus cycle. I like the goat ability. I think it's kind of a fun, especially putting it on an enchantment. I think is interesting because then you kind of can go around, pick and choose, and play some politics with these enchantments. You say, "All right, I'm gonna play a psychic impetus. Who's gonna get it?" Play some politics with that. Have a little bit of fun with all these different goad triggers that you're gonna be getting from all of these cards.
All right, let's move on to our reprint category. First up in the reprint category, Arcane Signet, which is actually in all 5 of the decks.
Yeah, something I guess we must have. Did we look over it during the last one?
No,
Or did
actually, we
we?
didn't. In the symbiotic swarm, we did actually not include Arcane Signet, mainly because I forgot it was in the set.
Yeah, I accidentally looked over that. We apologize, but yeah, Arcane Signet is in all five of the decks, which is a fantastic include. Arcane Signet as two, and then it's an artifact tap. Add one mana of any color in your commander's color identity.
It's
It's,
just
I
it's
mean,
an auto include, and in most commander decks, there is no reason you don't want to play this over like Felwar Stone.
yeah, I mean, I think that this card, I mean, it's not crazy expensive right now. It's about at the $4 mark, and it was up there for a little bit, I believe. But seeing it reprinted is great. Getting it more readily available for the commander community at large, and people are going to start being able to throw it in all their decks. You'll see it occur just as much as Soul Ring, I think.
The next card on our list can go in all of your decks as well. Not that it's probably good in all your decks like Arcane Signet is, but it can because it is an artifact. Psychosis Crawler. 5 mana star. Power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand, and whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life.
I've always really liked this card. I run it in a handful of decks, and it's fun to see him reprinted. I mean,
He was getting
def-
up there too for a little while.
yeah,
I
I
remember
believe
I
so.
needed a copy of this card for some deck I was building, and I was like, why is this card $5?
Yeah, definitely good to see him back.
And even within the context of this deck,
Yeah,
whenever you're getting that exchange where whenever I cycle, now I get to ping all of you, kind of like you're getting with Braylon whenever you're discarding those cards, except this one's on the draw. So if you have this and Braylon on the battlefield at the same time, you're getting something on the way out and on the way in.
yeah. I think you kind of put you're gonna want to play Psychosis Crawler and Braylon at the same time, and then every time you cycle, people are gonna be taken two, and that adds up pretty quickly. Honestly, getting taking 2 damage every time you cycle, which is all this deck does for the most part. Like it wants to just continue to cycle and get value off of that. It's gonna be you're gonna be hurting a little bit, I think.
I would agree. Next on our list, Sun Titan Commander Staple, 4 white for a 6/6 vigilance. Whenever Sun Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, you get a target permanent back from your graveyard with converted mana cost 3 or less. I really like to see Sun Titan reprinted in the Commander products because it's kind of a white staple when you think about it. I don't know if there's really a deck out there that wouldn't benefit, even if it's minimal benefit, from having Sun Titan in their white deck.
Yeah, he's always been extremely good. People love playing him, and even if you just hit, one battlefield trigger and like one attack trigger to get two things with CMC 3 or less back from graveyard to the battlefield, always getting some value. And this card, I mean, just overall, this card's just been really, really good. Has seen a lot of play from different people in different ways. I mean, ever since he came out.
Just a really solid reprint. It wasn't really terribly expensive before its reprinting now, but it's still one of the better reprints that we would like to see kept down in price by getting a continual reprint every once in a while, which it seems to be getting a reprint every, I would say, maybe once twice a year. It seems to get a reprint in some way, shape, or form that drives down the price, and that's good because this card can go in most white decks, and it's not a bad include.
Yeah, and you know, speaking of cards that you want to see reprinted, that's going to bring us to our next one. Locust God is getting a reprint. Is you know
I
just
did not
raw
realize this
value.
was a $20 card before reprinting.
Yeah, he was getting up there. I mean, he combos really well with a lot of different things, and I really like seeing a card like this reprinted in a commander set.
Especially even the Locust God in the context of this deck, whenever you're drawing that card, you get the 1/1 blue flyer. And then whenever like it not being able to die super easily, and it has flying, it's evasive, it has an activated ability, that Cryptic Trilobite can take advantage of, one of the activated abilities in the product. For 2 blue and a red, draw a card, then discard a card. So you're also getting that discard trigger that Braylon cares about.
Yeah, and the draw card that Shabraz wants to see.
Exactly. This is a really solid reprint, not only in the context of this deck, but in the context of this was a $20 card that a lot of people like to play this deck as the commander by itself, but also there's a lot of decks that would play this in the 99 just for straight value.
Yeah, this card is as every time I've seen it played, it has gotten people value, sometimes even won them the game. And you know, stuff like that getting reprinted is always really nice. Like this is a combo piece, and we're seeing it in a commander set. The Wizards is saying, you know what, we acknowledge how much people like playing this card, so here you go, have another printing of him.
Good reprint value. And speaking of good reprint value, we have Chandra Flamecaller, which is the Planeswalker for this product. 4 red, red, 4 loyalty, +1. You get to make 2, 3, 1 red elemental creature tokens with haste, but you have to exile them at the beginning of the next 10 step. The 0, which is the one this deck is concerned about, discard all the cards in your hand and then draw that many cards, +1. And then -X, she fireballs something, deals X damage to each creature. This is a
I
super valuable card, or like super value card.
Yeah, I think in the context of this deck, because when this card first came out, I thought it was a little underwhelming. I think it had a little bit of standard play, but in the context of this deck, it's going to be really good. That 0 ability is, I mean, you have a full hand of 7, and you have maybe Psychosis Crawler out or Braylon, whoever. You're gonna deal a lot of damage really quickly. Dropping and or drawing like 7 cards. Just hey, everybody's gonna take 7. That hurts.
I also think it's worth to note that you get to draw that many +1, whereas like something like Windfall, it's dependent on the rest of the table. This one's entirely self-contained, where you get to activate that ability, and it's dependent on how many cards you have in your hand, and then you're getting another card. This
Yeah,
interacts with the Locust God, where you're getting to draw that card, and whenever you draw those, let's just say you have a full hand, you activate Chandra, drop the 7, and then you draw 8. Well, you just made 8 1/1 blue red insect tokens with flying. This interacts with Braylon and Shabraz because you're discarding, you're getting the value on the way out for Braylon, and then on the way back in for Shabraz. Just really good overall.
yeah, and you know that I don't have a lot else to say on her. I think that you know she's I think she's gonna stay in this deck for sure. That having that 0 ability to wheel like that multiple times is really nice. A little on the expensive side CMC wise for a red and a red, but still extremely doable. I think we'll move to our next card here. Descend upon the Sinful. It's a sorcery for 4 white white. Exile all creatures. Delirium, put a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. Which, if this deck is doing what it wants to do, it you should have those. You should have Delirium online when you go to play this card.
This is the perfect deck for this card because before, Descend Upon the Sinful wasn't really seeing that much of play, mainly because there's not a ton of graveyard decks that involve white. They're usually touching Sultai in some way, more so than they ever touch Abzan. And the getting the 4/4 white angel creature token every time getting the 4/4 angel token with the delirium trigger and then wiping everybody else's board, because obviously in this deck there's sorcery cards, instant cards that have cycling, there's creatures that have cycling, there's lands that have cycling. It's not going to be that hard with how much you're drawing and discarding these cards to get that delirium activated.
Yeah, and by at the earliest, you're playing this turn 4, turn 5. I don't know that you would have that big of a reason to unless someone's really ramping up on creatures early. This is more of kind of a late game exile all creatures, but and which also is going to get around stuff with indestructible. and then you put the 4/4 White Angel on the back of that, and maybe you go and move to combat, and you're able to start punching face with this White Angel. Just overall, a solid card, especially in the context of this deck.
Another cycle of cards that I was actually super surprised to see them reprint, because normally we don't get these cards in the product. We get some like other version, like a Felwar Stone, was the Signets. And in this case, it's the Azorius, Boros, and Izzet Signets. All three of them are actually in this deck, which is really incredible to me, honestly.
Yeah, and they've never been really hard to find. They've never been super expensive, but it's just nice to have cards that people are using in every single deck, thrown in here to make it, just easier for them to add that to their collection, easier for those commander staples to be, right there in these new decks for new players to come in and start adding commander staples to their collection.
And the thing about the signets is that they actually kind of do creep up there in price, kind of like we see with Soul Ring, where it gets reprinted in the Commander product, and then we make it full circle back to the Commander product the next year. And by the time we get back to that point next year, it's 4 or 5, maybe even $6 again. And we see this with the signets as well, where they might receive a reprinting like they did in the guild kits, and they drop down for a little bit, but then they slowly start getting back up there, because the most popular play, I would argue, in Commander is turn 1 Soul Ring into a Signet. Is usually what you see most of the time if they're ramping into another Mana Rock.
Yeah, that is the kind of quote unquote best play that you see a lot of times in Commander, in that when you want to go for an early game ramp is just the Soaring into a Signet. And we don't see that the ability to do that a lot of times in Commander product, but you can here. We've got the Soul Ring, we've got the Signets. Even if it's an Arcane Signet, still really good value. And obviously, it doesn't happen all the time. You got to have all that in your opening hand. But still, I love seeing the Signets get reprinted. It makes it so much easier for newer players to start being able to build on their own, because they have those cards that may only be a couple of bucks, but you are always running whenever you're building a commander deck.
One really smart thing that I did with these, that I think they did with these Commander products, takes us to our next card, which is Tectonic Reformation, and it's the card from Modern Horizons. 1 in a red enchantment. Each land card in your hand has cycling for a red, and then Tectonic Reformation itself has cycling for 2. That this card probably would have shot up in price at least a little bit before the release of this product, because people would have been like, "Oh, well, it's a cycling deck. This card is perfect for this. It's a red. It has it's Jeskai cycling. It has red in it. It's perfect." I'm really glad to see that they thought about this. Like, okay, we should probably put this in here, not only probably not for the reason just to like save the price, obviously, but the fact that they're like, oh, well, this is a really good value card for this deck. It should go in here. And, even though it was just printed not that long ago in Modern Horizons, they weren't afraid to put it in here. And I'm really glad to see that.
Yeah, definitely is something that is really nice to see. Having this card that, even though it just got printed, they're giving it to us again because they know that people were going to put it in this deck anyway. And I just in general always thought this was a pretty cool card to give all the land cards in your hand cycling, so that maybe you're getting mana flooded, and then you can just, with that little bit of mana that you have, maybe you're able to start getting rid of some of those lands and hopefully drawing into the gas that you need to continue the game.
And again, on the topic of taking older, not necessarily older cards, but in this case, our next card, older cards that also happen to interact with cycling and using them for the benefit of this deck, we have Fluctuator, which is a 2 mana artifact that says whenever you cycle a card, you get, or it says cycling abilities, you basically get to cycle for free if the cycling cost is 2.
Yeah, cycling costs you use are two less to use. So again, another card that they saw, they're like, people are gonna put this in anyway, so let's go ahead and do it for them so that once they pick this deck up, they have less edits to make. Basically, is kind of how I think that thought process would have gone.
It also really contributes to the synergy that this deck has. I think maybe out of all of the decks, this deck has probably the most synergy out of all of them.
Yeah, and I think I may even argue that has some of the better reprints.
It for the like within the context of this deck, it probably has some of the best reprints for the deck as a pre-constructed product. Playing this
Yeah,
straight out of the box, there are probably so many cards that they didn't have to include that they did include in here that you would probably have to make the additions if you wanted to upgrade this deck. But no, like this deck already has a lot of the synergy pieces right out of the box.
yeah, and this next card that we'll talk about definitely doesn't. It's a little bit of a more pillow fort card, but it does let you draw cards, which is what this deck wants to do. That's Asperia, Supreme Judge, for 2 white, blue, blue, flying. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, you may draw a card. And it's a 6/4 Sphinx. I think that this was a really good include. I think that giving this deck a little bit of a pillow fort while they're cycling their cards, giving them something to sort of protect themselves, it was just a good include. Not crazy synergizing with the cycling aspect of things, but a really good card to keep you in the game while you're cycling.
I just think it's a pretty solid reprint to put in a commander product. It helps you because you get to draw a card whenever a creature attacks you, and obviously you want to be drawing cards because you want to be drawing your cards with cycling, so that then you can activate the cycling ability, pitch the card, and then obviously hopefully gain value in some way off of it. I think Asperia just really contributes to that, and there's not really much more to say about Asperia. The next card, however, also a guild leader from Ravnica. We have Niv-Mizzet the Firemind, 2 blue blue red red for a 4/4 dragon wizard. Flying whenever you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Tap to draw a card.
I think out of all the Niv Mizzet cards, this is probably one of the ones that sees the most play.
I think it is the one that probably sees the most play.
I mean, the new 5-color Niv Mizzet is we're starting to see a little bit more as a commander, but overall Niv Mizzet the Firemind, even like either as a commander or in the 99, I see him all the time, and we love to see him reprinted. Just a overall good card when you want to be drawing cards. Again, another one of those cards that's going to be pinging people down as you're drawing the card. So that's what 3-4 cards that is pinging people as you're drawing cards. We whenever you're playing commander, you always like having redundancies in your deck that so the thing that your deck wants to do, you always have something that you can draw upon to be able to do that thing. So to having another kind of draw card to deal the damage, redundancy is great.
And we're going to kind of round things out here with our land reprints with Reliquary Tower, which is always a good reprint to see because it's probably one of the most sought after lands in Commander, just due to the you have no maximum hand size thing, and the social contract keeps people from like blowing up your lands. So playing a Reliquary Tower is like super safe if you're going to be having a lot more cards in your hand than the maximum of 7.
Yeah, and Reliquary Tower has always just been solid value, even if you're like starting out not great. Maybe get um you get mana screwed and you're not drawing into any of your lands. Well, if you started that Reliquary Tower, now those cards that you're drawing you don't have to pitch, and once you start getting into that land, they're able to because you were able to keep all these cards in your hand. Once you get the mana flowing, you can start playing all this stuff that you've been able to keep.
And honestly, the next land that we have on the list, Prairie Stream, it's one of the Zendikar have lands where you have to have 2 basics in order to have it enter untapped. Because they're fetchable, they're playable in Commander. Because there are cards in Commander that say go find a forest card or a plains card or whatever. Like Farseek is probably the one that comes to mind for most people. That says go find some basic land type land that's not a forest. or not necessarily not a forest, but it just doesn't say you can't find a forest, but you can find like a mountain forest or something in that scenario. They're just super playable because they're obviously two colors and they're both land types. So they started to creep up there in price when people started to realize that, hey, these are actually pretty good in Commander. Maybe we should be playing these. They're kind of cheap. So it's really good to see the reprinted here. In addition to the pain lands, like Shivan Reef in this deck, which is tap to add a blue or a red, but if you do, it pings you for one, or it can add colorless. Another really good one because it's both colors, and we have 40 health in Commander. It's not really a big deal to take one every once in a while if you have to. And then the Signet Land Skycloud Expanse, where I know this one was actually getting up there in price a lot because these haven't been reprinted in a long time.
Yeah, I've always really liked the Signet lands. It's I mean it literally it's what the name implies. It's a signet that you get to play on your land drop, which is always really nice. Obviously not going to be the first land you play in a game, or else you're not going to be able to use it. But I run a handful of these in a couple of different decks, and they've always been really helpful when being able to add both of those colors. Whereas for like the Shivan Reef, you get the blue or the red. In this case, I can tap my Soul Ring and tap this for both the blue and the red, and maybe have that one floating from the Soul Ring or whatever it may be. I've always really liked the Signet lands. So that comes to we got two more things we want to cover here. The first one, give it a grade. So Cameron, A to E, give it a grade. What do you think?
I think this is probably a solid A. It might not be the most powerful out of the box, but it has so much synergy that I definitely think it's an A quality commander deck. Just
Yeah,
out of the box, A quality.
I'm gonna agree with you there. I think this is a solid A. As you said, the synergy is just fantastic, and a lot of really solid reprints, along with just some really fun new cards that we're gonna hopefully see some more of.
And
So, and
also
that'll
bring to light this mechanic that really didn't get to see a lot in Commander before, bringing this mechanic up to maybe the level of some of these other decks that are on maybe the tier 3, 4, whatever. Or maybe I should probably use the EDH scale that we as Commander players have tried to establish. The Commander products right out of the box are somewhere in between like a 3 to 4. This right out of the box, even with minor upgrades, it could be a 5 or a 6 pretty easily.
Yeah, I agree. And talking about things that we might want to add to make this a 6, maybe even a 7. Let's go to our pick three. Cameron, I'll let you go first. What are your pick three? The three additions you're gonna make to this deck?
I think my first 3 additions. The first one is Curiosity. It's a blue enchantment that says whenever the enchanted creature deals damage to a player, you get to draw a card, and that synergizes super well with Niv-Mizzet because it's a combo. So I really like the Curiosity and Niv-Mizzet combo in here because you're drawing a ton of cards and then you get to take advantage of your cycling. Geth's Grimoire, which says whenever an opponent draws a card, you get to draw a card. I believe is what it says. I don't know why I'm blanking on this right now. Whenever an opponent discards a card from his or her hand, you may draw a card. That's exactly what it says. I knew it. It's a 4 mana artifact. So if you transition this deck maybe more towards the wheel aspect, where you might put a couple more wheel cards in here. I included this card because Windfall is already in the deck, so if you have this plus Windfall, if somebody has 7 cards in their hand, they discard that 7, and now you're drawing 14. So I just thought that was a really good combo to have in the deck. And then Fateful Showdown just as another personal wheel, kind of like Chandra, where Chandra, you get the 0 to draw and then, or discard your hand. Hopefully you have some ability to take advantage of the cards going away and then obviously coming back in. And then Fateful Showdown is kind of the same thing where it's like it deals damage to target creature or player equal number of cards in your hand, and then you get to discard all the cards in your hand and then draw that many cards. Except where Chandra, you'd get to draw an extra one you don't with Fateful Showdown. So it's kind of like a personal wheel. I just think that all of these things combo together. There's some stuff in the deck that you might want to take out, like maybe the Impetus cycle isn't doing it for you. You might want to put in something a little bit more powerful. That's probably where I would start, is taking out the Impetus cards for some of these. And then you kind of have options where you go from there.
All right, and so for my pick 3, so originally I actually did think Curiosity being one of the better cards to include, but we decided that we would do 3 kind of separate ones, not having any overlaps. So my first one here is Leveler. So it's 5 mana artifact creature. It's a 10/10. When it comes into play, remove your library from the game. So just get rid of that library. It's gone. And that, I know that seems like, Aaron, why would we do that? Well, that's what brings me to my next card, Thassa's Oracle. For a blue and a blue, a Merfolk Wizards 1/3. This was recently printed when we went back to Theros. And when Thassa's Oracle enters the battlefield, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is your devotion to blue. Put up to one of them on top of your library and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If X is greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you win the game. So basically, if you have 7 mana, you play Leveler, then you play Thassa's Oracle, and you have won the game successfully. And I think that I've always liked this combo. I think it's neat. I actually put it into one of my decks right after Thassa's Oracle came out. I picked up both of these cards, and the last one here, a little bit different of a card, but I think that for what this deck wants to do, it would be really, really interesting to see how this works out. And that's Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur. He's one of the Praetors for 8, a blue and a blue. Flash, at the beginning of your end step, draw 7 cards. Each opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. So I think that, having all these creatures that are going to ping, if when you're drawing cards to at the end at your end step be drawing 7 cards, if you've got your Niv Mizzet out or your Psychosis Crawler, to be able to ping them for 7 at your end step every single turn that you have Jin Gitaxias, because sometimes once people see him, they say, no thanks, don't want my maximum hand size to be reduced by 7. He is quite scary. But I think overall he would just be a really fun include. Maybe not the best include, but for me, I always have really enjoyed running the Praetors in different decks. So to kind of see what he could do with all this cycling stuff and continuing to draw cards would be really interesting. And that is all we have for you guys today. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. Let us know what you guys like about this deck, what you don't like, what you would add to the deck, what you would remove. Hit us up on Twitter. Thanks for watching.
See you guys next week. Bye.